The following podcast is a presentation of Project Entertainment Network.
Welcome to the Sample Chapter podcast, the show where authors read a sample chapter from one of their books. Here's your host, Jason A. Meiske.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Sample Chapter podcast. This is episode 179 of the show. We've got a couple of very special guests for you this week. We are going to be sitting down and talking with Brandy M. Miller and Wilnona Marie. Wilnona, you might recognize that name. She's a return guest. She is of the And I Thought Ladies duo. But this time she's here discussing her latest book that she wrote with Brandy, Free Falling and Loving It. Along the way, I'm having a blast with these ladies talking about getting unstuck from your story, the business of romance, showing versus telling in romance, and knowing the character backgrounds and backstories so that you can create their front story. That and so much more. It's a very good conversation. I think you're going to really like this because we really dive in deep into story and characterization and all that, and it's really great. So if you're interested in romance, or if you're just interested in building a story, this is a great conversation and one you're going to really enjoy. So stay tuned for that. That's coming up here in just a moment. Meanwhile, I'd like to thank our sponsors, starting with Scrivener, my favorite writing software. Hey, check out this commercial so you can hear how to save 20% on the regular desktop version. Jason here. Hey, I wanted to take a moment and tell you about my favorite writing tool, Scrivener. Now, I know you've heard about Scrivener because their writing software has been embraced by hundreds of thousands of other writers like you and I, from the novice to best-selling novelists. The reason we all use it is because of Scrivener's core concept to bring all the writing tools you use together in a single application. And with tools like automatic backup, character maps, project goals, and let's not forget that amazing corkboard, you can see why I use Scrivener every day. As a bonus for Sample Chapter podcast listeners, use code CHAPTER for 20% off your desktop version. Scrivener writing software, built by writers for writers. All right, yes indeed. Thank you again to Scrivener. And hey, don't forget everyone that Scrivener 3 is available now, and it is incredible. I also want to thank Audible for partnering up with the show and offering you a free audiobook and 30-day trial by just clicking the link in the show notes. Hello friends, Jason here, and I wanted to take a moment to tell you about a great offer from Audible. Like you, I'm very busy. I have a full-time job, a family, I'm a thriller author, and I do this weekly podcast. But I also love to read. That's where Audible is a lifesaver for me. Whether I'm mowing the yard, working out, driving back and forth to work, or doing some other menial task, I can still listen to an incredible book through Audible. And now you can get a free 30-day trial by going to audibletrial.com/samplechapter. By doing that, you'll not only have that 30-day trial, you'll also gain access to guided wellness programs, theatrical performances, A-list comedy, exclusive Audible originals, and even podcasts like the Sample Chapter podcast. Last year is the first time I ever achieved my own personal reading goals, and it was because of some wonderful titles I listened to on Audible. Some of those titles were Ready Player 2 by Ernest Cline, narrated by Will Wheaton, the Awaken Online series from Travis Bagwell, narrated by David Stiefel, Patient Zero by Jonathan Mayberry, narrated by the incredible Ray Porter. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention previous guest Scott Meyer with his Magic 2.0 series, narrated by Luke Daniels. It's a lot of fun and definitely worth your time. Hey, full disclosure, by signing up at audibletrial.com/samplechapter, the show does get a little monetization, which goes directly towards any production needs with the show. So you're also helping us out here
by signing up. So what are you waiting for? Head on over now to audibletrial.com/samplechapter and start your free 30-day trial today.
All right. Pop Goes the Culture Network is the very first podcast network that we joined about 2 years ago. They are home to about a dozen other shows, all of them pop culture related. So whether you're looking for movie and TV news, celebrity gossip, maybe hearing about the box office again and how that's starting to return. I even just went over the weekend and saw A Quiet Place 2, which was outstanding, and I love getting to see a movie on the big screen again. All of that is available there at the Pop Goes the Culture Network. Click that link in the show notes to find out more. Finally, I want to thank the other wonderful network that I'm a part of, the Project Entertainment Network, home to more than 30 different shows of an extremely wide variety. Check out this advertisement for one of those incredible shows.
Hello, podcast addicts and curious listeners. Dr. Galvanic's Odd Tales is a narrated podcast with dark, thrilling, and mysterious stories. In each episode, Dr. Galvanic's Odd Tales will take you through the mysteries of the Australian outback, lead you into a remote corner of the galaxy, or it will accompany you through a mind-bending nightmare. You can find Dr. Galvanic's Odd Tales on Apple Podcast, Spotify, iHeartRadio. Subscribe to the show so you won't miss another episode. See you out there.
Okay, so our sponsors and podcast networks alike are both available on social media, just as we are. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram just by looking up the Sample Chapter Podcast. If you'd like to reach out to the show, you can do so by emailing me at samplechapterpodcast@gmail.com or leave me a voicemail by calling 660-851-1146. Alright, well, I don't know if you can tell by the sound of my voice, but it is very, very early. I got up early so I could go ahead and knock this out, and I'm getting my workout in, trying to change up my schedule a little bit and give myself some more writing time, because writing has not been that successful lately. I've been, other than writing a few things down once in a while, I have not been doing good. So, but anyway, that being said, how about we go ahead and get on over to our interview with Brandy M. Miller and Wilnona Marie and the novel that they co-wrote together, Free Falling and Loving It. Hello, Sample Chapter listeners. Welcome back. This is another wonderful and delightful episode. Today, we have a brand new duo for you, but at the same time, something familiar. We have return guest, Wilnona Marie of the And I Thought Ladies group, here today with another co-author, Brandy M. Miller, and they're going to be discussing their new book, Free Falling and Loving It. I can't wait to dive into this, and let's just get over to it. Ladies, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having us. I'm so pleased.
It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm so happy to have you both here. Wilnona, this makes third time, and oh my gosh, it's been fun catching up. I mean, we're talking about getting older and mystery pains and eating whole foods, all kinds of fun stuff prior to the show. But here we're talking about this new book. This is exciting.
It is exciting. It is.
It's really exciting for me because it's my first venture into romance. And if it hadn't been for Brandy, I'd have never finished this. This is the first book that has taken me years to write, not weeks.
Well, let's go back a little bit. How did you two get involved? How did you two connect with this idea, and how did it begin?
It began because I was stuck. Brandy, you want to take the rest?
Well, no, I mean, she'd been working on it for 8 years, I think, right? Mm-hmm. And she was stuck. And so she and I knew each other from other venues and areas. We had a friendship going on for 4 years. And I was her editor for her magazine, the And I Thought literary magazine, and then the 25 Hottest Indies magazine. Oh. And so she knew I could write. And so, she asked me if I would look it over and give her some input. And so part of what I did was I created basically character profiles and just what I thought their different motivations were and how I thought, they might have connected together based on what I'd read from her. And she's like, "Oh my gosh, you've got it. This is it." And so then we started working together on fleshing out the storyline and where we thought things would go. And
I
so
think
that's
for me, my favorite part is just, first of all, knowing that she got it, because I had actually tried to work with another author on it, and we just couldn't get together and make it work. And but then the second part was, when you've been writing something off and on for 8 years, you forget plot lines and characters and what they're supposed to be doing. And you're like, well, you can tell, like, in the first 4 years where I was constantly working, and then you're like, oh, she forgot a couple of months and she forgot this and that. And then Brandy pointed those out to me, and I was like, oh, I can fix that. So then we started to get a whole story that we could actually work on together.
Yeah. Oh gosh. I mean, I can completely relate to that. That's the exact same thing that happened with my first book. I'd been working on it for 7-8 years and just spinning my tires. I kept rewriting the first few chapters, and then I think, well, maybe if I jump towards the end and I'll write a little bit of that, and just kept skipping over the middle. And I finally got in with the local writing group, and that helped me kind of regain some focus and get that in there. And then NaNoWriMo hit, and I was like, all right, I'm going to start over fresh. Let's go from there. And yeah, the rest is history after that.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to forget what was going on in your book if you hadn't touched it in a while.
Mm-hmm. And I have to admit, like, when I started writing this book, I was coming back to having a writing career in genre. I kind of like only did mystery and suspense before, and then actually someone asked me to write a romance book that would be for the modern woman. And so I was like, sure, I can do that. Because I mean, at that time, suspense book took me like 3 weeks, maybe. Like I finished the entire draft in 3 weeks. And so I was like, oh, I'll have it to you in a couple of months because I mean, it's romance. I'm going to need more time. And, 8 years later, I'm back. We wrote a couple, I think the end I thought ladies have 17 books out. And then I wrote another 6 by myself. So it's been a while. There's a lot of characters floating around in the head and none of them made sense for that romance book. Not to mention, I'm also like, I can't write romance and I know that. So Brandy was a huge help at actually putting love into the story because I use plot-driven things, not character-driven. And that's different. Brandy, I'm sorry, I talked a lot. Do you want to say something now?
I know. I mean, it's true, though. One of the things that's hard about romance is that you have to fall in love not just with the characters, but with their relationship. It has to be believable. It has to be something you really want to cheer for. Like, you have to see these people together and want them together. And that's part of the hard sell about romance.
Oh my gosh. I'm in the middle of a series, and I've got a young adult couple that it's will they, won't they, and I'm trying to do this moonlighting style. That kind of the arguing, and they like each other, but it's obviously they don't like each other also, and it's so frustrating trying to hit the right notes.
It is frustrating and it is challenging because you don't want it too much drama. Like, you don't want them constantly. You've got to walk that balance between them. But, well, it's kind of like being in a real romance, right? You got to walk the line between so much conflict that the conflict is the only thing that's there, and then putting that spark in there that tells you that, yeah, underneath all that arguing, there's something really going there. Like, it's more like they're fighting, not each other, but their feelings for each other.
Oh, I like that. Well, all right. So, like I said before, Wilnona is a return guest. This is her 3rd trip with her. So we're pretty familiar with Wilnona's past and her other books. Brandy, what is a little bit of your background and how did you get started?
Well, I wrote 6 books before I published my first one. And my first books that I published were nonfiction. And it was just like How to Write an Ebook in 40 Days or Less was my very first published book. And it was not geared toward anything advanced. It was just basically outlining my process for how I got it done. And so I put that out there, and it got pretty good reviews until we got a 1-star review, and I was like totally devastated. I was like, how dare she? And her comment was that there was nothing new in this book that you couldn't find on the internet. I'm like, I wrote it for beginners, lady. What do you want from me?
Yeah.
Anyway. And the second book I published was creating a character backstory, which was all about asking yourself the right questions to put yourself in the headspace to understand where this character comes from, what has shaped and formed them into becoming the person they are, so that they take life and they breathe on the page. Because if you don't have a solid idea of their backstory, it's hard to present their front story. You don't know where they're coming from. It's just like they don't exist until the story begins. But the reader needs to have a feeling, even if they don't know it, that this person lived before the pages started.
Oh, well said.
So taking that time, even if you don't include any of that backstory in your story, taking that time to walk through their background, how they grew up, where their first love was, where their first kiss was, the monumental things that change a person's life, taking those momentary steps to walk through that can actually help you bring some of that into your story in a meaningful way. Like, maybe they have an ex-girlfriend that's hanging around and you need to know that, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Maybe there's past infidelities in this relationship and you need to know that, because that pain is going to come through, or it should. And if it doesn't, you've failed.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, so that was my background. Was started off with the nonfiction, and then I'm actually very cautious with releasing fiction because it has such a potential for more impact on a person's life. When you pick up a nonfiction book, we all have a belief-based operating system that runs our brain and makes decisions for us without us even being aware of it. When you pick up a nonfiction book, you're being taught something. So your natural guard, your skepticism is up. You're going to analyze this person. You're going to say, well, do I trust what they say or not? Does this jive with what I already believe or not, right?
Mm-hmm.
But well-written fiction, in order to get into it, you have to suspend that natural belief system. So that means that everything that's written has a chance to plant a seed that wouldn't have gotten there otherwise. They're not on their defense against it. So I'm much more cautious with my fiction release. In fact, my first adult fiction release, The End of Purgatory, came out last year.
Wow. Well, congratulations.
Thank
That's fantastic.
You. Yeah. And it's a story about the difference between love and lust. Because, with all the 50 Shades of Grey and Twilight stuff, you see people getting into books about relationships where really it's not love. It's obsessive, unhealthy obsession.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so I wanted to contrast what unhealthy obsession looks like and where it leads, which is never a good place, and real authentic love, where the person leaves you free to walk away, free to say no, free to make your own decision. And so the book doesn't end with them together, but you know that the door is open.
Well said. Well, Wilnona, so we last talked in March last year, and you and Jade were quite busy at that time. You had your magazine, 25 Hottest Indie Authors, so much going on. What have you been up to this past year?
A few things. We released a board game based off of our actual script book, and we started a new podcast where we have real actors that read our script. And Brandy actually is one of the characters. She portrays Jenny. And Brandy, if you stick around for episode 4, that is Jenny's episode. She rocks the whole episode.
Oh, believe me, I'll be there.
And then, so we have that podcast, and we were able to actually meet more people in Hollywood through that podcast. Because, you have to get real research. And we figured, why not have our audience research with us? So we interviewed most of the people that are in here. Like, we have, it takes place in Hollywood. So we interviewed talent managers, publicists, agents, you name it. We interviewed them, the actual stars of shows, to see what their life is like. So our audience can learn about Hollywood. and they can listen to our script about Hollywood. And then, the last one that I really, really, really love, well, second to the most that I love, is we released new merchandise, which I like to call a clothing line. So we now have like bathing suits, tennis shoes, dresses, shirts, jewelry, and they're all from our books. They're inspired by our books. We just did a photo shoot on that last week, and the last thing that I really, really love is we got into having wine and wine glasses that are ours.
Oh my gosh.
I should say we're also writing new books.
Money is in the merchandising, man. The money is in the merchandising.
Wow,
the
that's
book
fantastic.
is just a place to begin, but it's not the place to end.
I should also mention that this year I actually am going to finish the first documentary and start the second documentary on our lives.
One of the things I hear a lot as an indie author is you want to make sure not to have all of your income coming from one area. So just your books, or if you're a podcaster, you're just getting it from the podcast, because if one thing ever goes away, now what do you do? And it's the same thing as, how we're used to growing up with, our parents had like one job, and maybe a secondary job or whatever. But, the days of sticking with one job for 30 or 40 years doesn't really stick around that much anymore. So people who lose that job, then what do you do next? So this is awesome. You've got so many what's the term for it? Pokers in the fire, so many different
streams of income. Yeah.
Yes.
It's actually the secret to every truly wealthy individual. They don't rely on just one stream of income. They will invest to build out multiple streams so that if one goes away, big deal, they've got 6 or 7 still coming in, and then they'll work to get another one going. So that's why you find the football player will invest in starting up a car dealership, right? Or a restaurant, so that there's always something coming in the door. And that's how they build that mega wealth. Most of us have been trained to rely on one income, like a job. And this is the reason why married people prosper more than single people do, because there's usually 2 incomes coming into the household.
I should mention, though, right here, that it's very important for the multiple streams. And the reason I learned this is because my mother was an entrepreneur. She left a really good job and started her own business. And when she started her business, you would think, oh, it's just that one income. No, there was 3 or 4 different income streams that were under the umbrella of the one business. So I've always seen it when I was younger. And I think I mentioned before, my first time doing taxes was at 7 years old by hand, because I wanted to stay up late. My mom was like, if you want to stay up late and you know how to add and subtract correctly, come on, and you can read, we're going to do taxes together. I learned to do taxes. And then I also wanted to say, one of the really great things about starting a new business, I don't know if anyone knows this, but for federal taxes for the first couple of years, you can take on net operating loss, and that will really knock down your profits from the other businesses. So you don't have to pay as much in taxes.
Wow. Fantastic.
Yeah. Plus, you can write off basically anything if it's a home-based business.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my goodness, right? I love the home office. Oh my word. And you're like, wait. And then I tried to always, when I was searching for a house, I made sure that the office was like even with each other room, so that when it came out, it literally came out to 1/6 of my house. Got this done. And it was perfect. Perfection.
Yeah.
Plus the depreciation with the net operating loss. Oh, please.
I mean, there's a lot of things that people don't realize they can do to leverage a book and turn it into something that actually benefits them multiple ways across the board. From taxes, if you're doing it as a business, you can claim it, like my table in my dining room is my workspace, and so I get to claim my dining room as a tax write-off. And when my computer, because I also do game development, so my computer is a tax write-off, and it's a beast. It's a $2,500 computer, and because I do game development, I can also write off games.
That's awesome.
Somehow We got talking about business and not
But yeah.
books.
I know.
Hey man, romance is business. Let's face it.
Okay, no. I remember many conversations with you, Brandy, where we were like, romance is not business. It's about feelings. And I was like, I don't know.
No. Romance is actually, the initial kickoff for romance is feeling. Starts off with infatuation. You feel that chemistry and that power. So that's the emotional stage. But if the romance is good, there will be a point where it moves past that initial emotional chemistry, and then it becomes, let's get down to business, right? Are we good and compatible? Are we going to be somebody that can last?
Right. Now, how do you two go through putting that on the book, though?
So I wrote the initial chapters, and then Brandy made it work. Because, as I say, I'm a very plot-driven writer because I write suspense. I mean, my characters change slowly. It takes like 6 books for them to really change, you know? Mm-hmm. So for Brandy being able to understand the emotions of human beings, because apparently my vision of romance was very odd. So she made it actual, like, real and normal and natural. Brandy, you can explain how that goes, because I have no idea.
Well, it's more a matter of, like I said, it's a figuring out what they're really fighting about, what's really going on, what's really driving the conflict, why are they attracted to each other, what is it about each other that they're looking for to gain? Because we get into relationships always with an eye toward filling a need, and so it's understanding the need that we're looking to fill that kind of helps drive that romance and the chemistry that builds. For instance, the character is a divorcee. She is put in a situation where she's confronted with her ex. She has to work with him. She doesn't have a choice. And yes, there's still a lasting chemistry between them. There's still that spark, but it's an unhealthy spark because it's driven by his narcissism and her, kind of having catered to that for a long time. So she's still kind of got that mentality. And so it's a predatory type thing. Like he senses prey and he's going to pursue it. So you kind of portray that, right? Like, gosh. There's chemistry, but it's not healthy chemistry.
Yeah, this is amazing stuff. Now, one of the things that our peers always tell us is show, don't tell. So do you have an example of how you would show that in a story?
Yeah, well, actually, yeah, absolutely. I mean, when Michael, who's her ex-husband, confronts her, like, he's intimidating. He's standing over the top of her. He's forcing his affection in her face. Like, he's not giving her a chance to choose. That shows a power dynamic that's off balance. And the way that she decides to handle it shows where she is mentally. Right? It's our response to events that actually kind of, character is how we handle the situations we're presented with. That's what defines our character.
For me, it was a metaphor I was writing, and I was hoping it went off well, but apparently it went okay. About, like, they get into an argument because she actually has to take, as Brandy was saying, a job working for her ex-husband and his fiance, the woman that he left her for. And he's, like, trying to say, you don't belong here. And somewhere in the middle of all that anger that they're going back and forth, she says it feels like a boat slip. She feels like a boat pulling into the slip next to your home in a foggy night, knowing that a warm hearth will be there to await you. And what she's talking about is just the fact that he is actually verbally abusing her, just tearing her to bits. And she's like, it should, for anyone else, they would just, like, repel. But because she's so used to it, she's like, it feels like I'm home. It feels like I'm loved again.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and that's something that happens when you grow up, or when you've been in a position long enough where the chaos has been constant, the abuse has been constant. Your brain does normalize that behavior, and you start to see that as normal behavior, and so it feels comfortable even in its discomfort. Which is, that's part of why it's so hard to leave those situations. Because you're used to that, because you're comfortable with that, because you know what to expect from that. Doesn't mean that's what you really want on the inside, but it is what starts to feel normal and natural. And so your brain sort of seeks that out. And it takes a lot to break loose from that kind of mentality.
Oh
and
my
that's
God.
kind of actually the book's progress is Haley starts off in that zone where she was used to that treatment from Michael, and then starts to see, you know what? No, that's not cool. I'm not okay with that. I want something better.
Yeah.
In fact, at the end of that argument, she does start to show, because there's two different. I love how Brandy did it, where she was like, well, why would Haley stand up right now if she's used to that? And it's like, because there's two different Haleys. There's Haley from work, because she ran a successful business before him, and she ran a successful business after him. And then there's Haley that lives with Michael, that the wifey. And so, like, they've been apart long enough that Haley from work is the one that shows up at the end of that argument instead of Haley the wife. And I think it was even further contrasted in the book, because she does on that same day meet a person that actually eventually invests in her emotionally, and you can see the contrast, but she's still a bit divided.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Well, I think there's a lot of women out there that do, and I was guilty of this one in my early marriage, is you're a strong, confident woman, not because you really want to be strong and confident, but because you feel like you can't trust anybody else. And then you meet a guy, and he seems to be the rock, right? The guy that you can depend on, the guy that you can rely on, the guy that'll always be there for you. And you don't check in too closely to why he is that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you get married, and you let go. You're like, oh, he's going to be there for me. Well, he was looking for the strong, confident woman. You stopped being that. Now you have a problem in your relationship, because he's not getting what he wanted, and he starts being unstable because he was expecting you to kind of give him a compass to go by.
Wow.
Because you seem to know what you wanted.
This is incredible stuff. I mean, holy cow. I mean, I think I'm going to start hosting my own like Dr. Phil type show. I'll just bring you ladies on here, and this has been amazing. And I've had so much fun getting to talk to talk to both of you in spite of all the technical difficulties and our host site bumping us off air. So we're, people don't know, but yeah, this is like take 2 of the show. Brandy, thank you so much for coming on, and Wilnona as well. Wilnona, what do you have coming up? Where can people find and follow you?
Oh, you can. What do I have coming up? Oh my goodness. There's episode 4 of the Ladies Tale podcast. We still have the other 3 podcasts. We made a few more while we were in quarantine, but you can check out everything that me and Jade are up to at www.andwethought.com, as well as, if you want a really short version of this, at andithoughladies.com. And I want to thank you again for having me back on for a 3rd time. I'm sorry it's not the fun poetry stuff.
No, that's all right. It's exciting that you're branching out and you've got so many new things. Brandy, where can people find and follow you?
Well, mostly I'm on Facebook, and that's where I usually hang out. I'm also on Twitter at Writer Brandy. Facebook is Brandy and Miller 1970 or Brandy and Miller 75. There we go. And then occasionally I pop in on my own website, which is writeyourbooks.today. I figured if there wasn't a clearer call to action than that, I couldn't have asked for a better website.
That's wonderful. Well, as always, we're going to have links for all of this in the show notes, and this is going to be a hefty episode with lots of links, so it's going to be great. Everybody, without further ado, I guess it's time to hand the floor over to our guests with Free Falling and Loving It.
Yes. So this is the beginning of chapter 6. I chose something kind of fun. Haley woke to the blare of sirens. Her feet hit the floor, missing the quick access slippers she kept beneath the bed for just such occasions. But she heeded the call of urgency to leave her house and move forward in her bare feet. Visions of plumes of smoke climbing the stairs in search of a resident to char triggered a fear that she was going to be roasted alive in her own dwelling. The thought trapped inside, burning up alongside everything she owned, was one that had haunted her since she was 7 years old. She considered slipping on her robe while scurrying to leave, her eyelids pasted shut beneath the sleep mask as she sprinted down the stairs to the door. The click of the jazz-era Harlem-style repurposed door helped a few fragmented thoughts settle into place as she stepped into the safety of the open air and the breezy late summer coolness began to slip around areas best not shown in public. A fear displaced the fear of burning alive, dulling the ordinarily pleasant sensation of air drying her more private crevices, and she found herself mentally reviewing her nightly routine with a silent prayer that she had not actually forgotten to put on clothing in her haste to exit the building. She began by patting her face. Her dermis was moisturized. That was the step that always came before unfolding the pajamas which were neatly stored at the end of her bed each morning. There were 2 bottles of her nocturnal skin routine used at the apex of the routine pyramid, followed by her underpants, a roller for her bangs, and her pajamas. Denying the evidence to the contrary, she reassured herself that she simply must be wearing the pajamas. Putting them on was the last step she took before climbing into bed each night. She must be overreacting. The fresh air caressing her curves was not proof of a reality she would rather not face. Starting at the crown of her head, Haley began patting the naturally curly mane, now brushed into a bun, down her neck and to her shoulders, and then onto her breast and nipple naked. She was bloody naked. All other thoughts attempting to whimper forth were drowned by those deafening words exploding forth. The horrifying reality confronted her. She left the building, hoping to preserve her life, but now found herself silently wishing that the ground would open beneath her and swallow her whole. I'm going to jump down, so you guys have the responsibility of reading the paragraphs in between this. The road clear, she bent down and blindly patted for the spare key under the fake rock and the giant planter on the left of her front step. The key was hidden between brushes and the flower box. She turned over the rock, and the key fell down in the dirt next to the cement-encased steps leading to the front door. A sense of urgency filled her mind. There was already plenty of tidbits available for our morning matinee viewing, and she had no desire to uncover the few pieces she could hide with her hand and forearms. Sorting through the dirt, expletives began streaming softly out of her mouth when she heard a man's voice coming from the sidewalk. Are you okay? She froze before sneaking a peek at the owner of the voice from between her knees. A light sheen on his forehead from his morning jog gave him an effervescent glow. The 6-foot, 3-inch guy was talking to her 2 airborne cheeks. Her hands were temporarily painted dirt brown. Her face had smears of topsoil on her front and back cheeks. Her hands were still resting on the pot. She was searching. What could he see? How much of her body bits were open to his view? Did she do enough exercise to be standing with her back end spread eagle? Was her full moon firm and her cellulite appropriately hidden? For the first time in her life, she considered the marriage of bleaching her excrement orifice. If she had to let her moon shine, it might as well be in its full glory. She stood up, covering her breast and lower area as she turned around to him. I'm fine. Why do you ask?
Okay, there you go. That was Brandy M. Miller and Wilnona Marie and their latest book, Free Falling and Loving It. And wow, what a cliffhanger there, huh? One of my favorite lines was, if you're gonna let your moon shine, let it be in its full glory. Hey, the book is available right now. Click the link in the show notes for where to pick it up and where to follow both of these wonderful ladies. Don't forget to also click the links in our show notes for our sponsors and podcast friends alike. And hit subscribe or follow button now, I believe is what it is, on like Apple Podcasts, so that you don't miss out next week when I'm back with another return guest, L.M. Revere, and her book, The Southernmost Star. Until then, take care, everybody.
This has been a presentation of the Project Entertainment Network.